Fountain University. I must say it feels great to be here to interact with colleagues, of diverse backgrounds. This is something that I cherish a great deal. Exchange of ideas helps strengthen our capacity to achieve or attract greater things, greater things as academics or researchers. So please let us ensure this kind of engagement is sustained. On that note, I would like to congratulate Fountain University for deeming it fit, to organize such an important program, and also for finding me worthy to facilitate the workshop. I say a big thank you. And also to my brother, Dr. Aide, he's been on my neck for months. He reached out to me around June last year, but we were unable to, identify a convenient period for both of us. So thank God, alhamdulillah, that this is now coming to fruition. I'm really delighted to be here. Thank you. So without much ado, let me switch to my presentation. Piero, kindly enable me to share my PowerPoint, please. Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, as mentioned by the moderator, right? This is a workshop that is well targeted. It's a workshop that is well targeted. Our focus essentially is to strengthen the capacity of our younger colleagues, graduate students, young academics, regardless of your background, regardless of your location, regardless of your university or research institute, right? So this program is not just for, academics and graduate students in Fountain University, right? This is for all of us, okay? So I encourage our colleagues to invite friends and those that might be interested in the workshop. It's a free workshop, right? So nobody will ask you to pay for this one. And I'm sure the PRO will be more than willing to share the recorded lecture, all right, with all of us. So this is good for us. And like I said, this is something that, I like to do, right? This is something that, one cherishes, a great deal. And this kind of platform has to be sustained. So as graduate students, right, we know research plays a key role, right? You cannot complete a PhD program without research. You cannot complete, a PhD program without research. So for graduate students who have reserved funds somewhere, well, I would say it will be relatively easier for them to complete their PhD programs. But from this part of the world, raising funds for graduate programs is usually a challenge. And that is why access to grants is as important as the graduate program, right? Why is that important? Why would you want to pursue grant opportunities? Okay, regardless of the funds reserved for your program, it can never be enough, right? Because there are several things that you have to get involved in to enjoy in a typical graduate program, right? It's not just about writing your dissertation or thesis, right? A lot is involved. And as we progress, I will share some of them with you. So as a graduate student or a young academic, you are able to achieve the following with research grants, right? with research grants. Mentorship. Most donor agencies will identify a mentor to guide you in the process of, executing the project that is being funded, right? So you are not alone, right? So that is one of the benefits of getting a grant for your research. Aside the structured program in the university, where you have a supervisor to guide you, you have a committee to oversee your work. When your work, you are able to attract grants for your work, you also get mentored by other, established scholars, right? That is one of the benefits of, attracting grants. Another one is that because you are not doing this alone, chances are above average that the outcome is going to be, standard. It will meet all the requirements for publication in a good journal. So, so it's not enough for you to say, I have grants to complete my program. There are several other benefits associated with attracting grants. Like I said, mentorship. Mentorship is priceless. And I must say that that is one thing that is missing from this part of the world, right? Postgraduate students, they technically handle their project alone on average. But when you are able to attract grants, you'll find external commitment, external or associate supervisors that will guide you through the process. A typical example is AERC, Cordestria, PEP. When you getting grants from this funding or donor agencies helps you, it strengthens your capacity to publish in good journals. So you don't say, I have enough money to run my program. Yes, you have enough money to run your program, but you can't buy scholarship. What I mean by that is you can't buy an established scholar to mentor you, right? But because of the connection some of these agencies have with established scholars, right, they are engaged to guide you, right, in your research journey, right? So that's one of the benefits of attracting grants. So you don't say, well, I'm from a well-to-do family, I don't need to apply for any grants. I can easily run my PhD program in Harvard. Yeah, that is good. But what about mentorship? You can't pay for it. So even if you have more than enough, it's always good to apply for research grants. Not because not because you need the money for those who are, who are endowed, but because you also want to undergo the rigor that a typical graduate program entails. You want to understand the rigor. You want to be able to cope with the rigor. You want to be able, you want to be well transformed in a way that when you complete the program, you are proud of yourself. So mentorship, quality research, and also effective dissemination of research outcomes. Like I said, when you are well mentored, the research outcome will find home in one of the top journals. In other words, it becomes publishable in a good journal because you are not doing this alone. Established researchers, they know the requirement, the philosophy of some of the top rated journals. So when they are mentoring you, they are, in a way, you are exposed to some of the requirements for publishing or getting a published in a good journal. And so by the time every year you are able to attract grants, you will see that every year too you'll be able to publish at least a paper in one of the top rated journals, and that will strengthen or enhance your visibility. So you can see having enough to run a program can help you complete the program, which is good, but that will not guarantee quality mentoring. That will not guarantee visibility. That will not guarantee publishing your research outcome or research output in a good journal or in a recognized journal. So you can see the benefit of applying for research grant. This is what I tell people. Don't be too comfortable with what you have because, yes, how much are they even paying me? They are paying me $2,000, right? $2,000 maybe, I mean, when you look at the value of Naira now, is how much is $1,000? It's roughly 4 million Naira. That's not even enough to do this, but look at other benefits, that come with research grants. Like I said, mentorship is priceless. So that alone is enough to pursue, to apply for research grants. Most of the non-agencies, in fact, that's their priority. Mentorship is their priority, not the money per se. They will tell you, yes, you are entitled to this fund, but at the same time, we are concerned about the quality of output, right, that will be produced eventually, after completing the program. I'm a living testimony of that, right? I benefited from AERC research grants. My PhD was funded by AERC. I was getting stipend from AERC. I was paid that for 36 months by AERC, stipend every month, in addition to, AERC paying my tuition fee for 3 years, right? My thesis was also funded by AERC. And AERC assigned one of the, in fact, is highly recognized in the area of theoretical econometrics. One of the top rated researchers in the area of econometrics, and that is Adebare, right? Adebare was my associate supervisor with, I'm sure some of you know Adebare LM test for panel unit truth, right? For those who are familiar with panel data analysis. AERC assigned Adebare to me to help with my thesis. And also, I benefited from my center's collaboration with the University College London, where I was also mentored by Richard Blundell, right? Richard Blundell, who developed the system GMM with Bond, right? So that is what I mean by quality mentorship. Money can't buy that, and this is one benefit that comes with most research grants, particularly for young academics, particularly for graduate students, right? So the nature of research grants is gradually shifting from being demand-oriented to supply-driven. What do I mean by this? See, demand-oriented is where the donor agency will advertise a call for people to apply and then be considered for research grants. That space is fast shrinking, right? In other words, we don't get as much as we used to get before. So that's a challenge. The number of potential applicants keeps increasing, but the window of opportunities to attract grants, right, is shrinking. So that's a big challenge. So established researchers have now resorted to the supply-driven one, which is very challenging but less competitive. An example is, I do that a lot. You identify a problem in your society, whether locally or internationally, and then you develop a proposal suggesting how that problem can be resolved. That is being supply driven. You are the one proposing the idea, that innovative idea of yours, right, regarding how a problem, and an evident, problem that all of us can see. And we know resolving the problem matters to all of us, right? You develop a program that highlights potential solutions to the problem. That is the supply driven. And it's less competitive because you are the one who owns these innovative ideas. And so you are likely going to be the only one that will be competing for that grant if there's any opportunity for such, if there's any budget for such within that organization. That's so the focus. Most established scholars rarely apply for these demand-oriented research grants because you see all kinds of people, random applicants here and there apply, and there's no limit to the number of applications for the demand-oriented. And the space is no longer as big as it used to be. Right. So, and I will discuss this. Just about 2 months ago, we forwarded 2 proposals to Afees suggesting how, 2 issues that cut across African countries can be resolved. Right. That's our selling point now as researchers at my center. And as we progress, I will dwell more on what that entails. Okay. For demand-oriented, research grants, that's what are the characteristics of, this type of research grants. Specific calls. So you wait until a call is announced, right, for expression of interest. You can't apply until that is available, until that is launched or advertised by the donor agency. The second one is that, in that call, you will see the requirements for consideration. They will tell you you must have completed this program. You must have this capacity in XYZ. All the requirements that will facilitate the consideration of your application will be highlighted in the call. Also, detailed information about the deliverables. That if you eventually win this grant, you'll be required to, execute XYZ, deliverables, right, in the call. You also find deadline for submission. That is for the demand-oriented research grants. Most graduate students, most young academics rely on this type of research grants. So they'll be checking online, to search for calls and then apply if the call aligns with their areas of expertise. Let's note the following about the demand-oriented research grants, some characteristics. Highly competitive, because you can't limit, the application because the calls are usually widely circulated. So anybody can apply. So the responsibility now lies on the donor agency to review and then identify the most promising among all the proposals. Second, terms of reference. And they are typically non-negotiable because the TOR, they are detailed in the call. So there is hardly anything a successful applicant can do to change the TOR. Unlike the supply-oriented one, where the applicant in this case, for developing that proposal to solve a real-life problem, right? And the donor agency will have to sit and negotiate, how the terms of reference should be drafted, because perhaps, the applicant is the only one applying for the grant, but it's the only one who has been able to identify the problem in the society and also suggesting potential ways of resolving the problem. So that means the supply-oriented one is relatively flexible, unlike the demand-oriented. Calls must be announced before you can even apply, like I said previously. And also, it is typically expensive to manage. So if you see a call online, you just see, even if it's not your area of expertise, you still want to apply. Say, let me just try. Who says, if I'm considered, then I will engage people who are really versed in that area to assist me, in executing the project. People do that. But a new wave of demand-oriented research grants is that this may shock you. Grant awarding institutions now reach out to potentially qualified experts rather than leaving the course open to any random applicant. Why is that? Why are they now pursuing this channel of attracting scholars or experts to do their, to execute their project? It's because established researchers hardly respond to calls these days, honestly, because they know there are several potential, applicants to apply for the thing, and there's no limit to the number. There's no limit until the deadline, right? So researchers, established scholars, they are tired of applying for such grant opportunities. And so grant award is just now, because I'm also a living witness for that. They just completed a project. I'm not going to mention the agency. The agency reached out to me that we have advertised, but we would like you to apply and then indicate interest, because we observe you have not received your application. And so I got the job by virtue of that connection. So you see all kinds of calls, but I can also categorically tell you that some of the calls the donor agencies are already identified. Not that it will still be competitive, but they know those that really matter in terms of how the project should be executed, how to guarantee effective execution of the project. So established researchers have very strong research profiles and usually make the task of granting award institutions relatively easier. Because they can, they tick all the boxes. And so there is no politics is involved because they want the best outcome, right? They want the best for their research. They want the best hands to handle the project for them. So this approach also minimizes the cost of selecting experts for research grants, because XYZ people can handle the job for you, and they are not indicated interest. They are the best in that area, and they are not willing to apply. What will you do? So most award is just now, they personally just reach out. But why not apply for this? It's an opportunity for you. They can reach out to as many qualified experts as possible, just again to make it competitive. Right. So why is this now important? This speaks to something, and that is about our visibility. As scholars, as professors, we must ensure we are globally visible. Right. That in itself is an asset, because if a donor agency is looking for an expert in a particular area, you are likely going to be consulted if truly you are an expert in that area and you are globally visible, right? So that's one of the takeaways here. That when they say reaching out to them, they only reach out to those that are visible online, right? Regardless of your location, as long as you are visible online, and you have all it takes, you have you take all the boxes, your capacity is strong enough to attract the grants. Certainly, you get a call from any of the agencies where there's an opportunity for such. Supply-driven research grants. That is capacity to align research interest with those of the grant awarding institution. Like I said, this one is now about identifying a problem and proposing potential solutions to solving the problem, right? Proposing innovative ideas of resolving the problem. So that is supply oriented. And I said, you're likely to be competing with yourself with this, because you're possibly the only person proposing the innovative ideas to the grant awarding institution. African Economic Research Consortium is a typical example in this regard. Now, you can write a proposal any time of the year and send to the organization. The organization will gladly acknowledge, and then you'll be told, that a process has been initiated to evaluate the relevance of your proposal to the organization. Capacity to also identify areas of significant research and training needs. I do this too. At times, I develop programs sent to CBN. That I'll be happy to collaborate with CBN in the following, training needs. Right. So if they find that worthy, I'm invited to, then one can be invited to facilitate the program. Okay. This is applicable to virtually on a student that plays a high premium on research and training. So you will now be the one to identify the gap by that training need, whether research need, it's your responsibility. Demonstration of strong credentials to offer the requisite services for individual-based research grants. So when you are submitting your proposal, you also must include a section that highlights your potential, your capacity, right? Your profile, indicating that you are best suited to execute the project for the organization. Okay, and also demonstration of strong interdisciplinary collaborations for team-based research grants. So if the proposal is being written by an organization, maybe my center, maybe we are doing one now for PEP, right? So the proposal is there to be institutional. So in that instance, you have to demonstrate that the center is involved in interdisciplinary, collaborations, research projects. So that should be the selling point of a center. So you're not saying we can only handle macroeconomics related projects, or we can only handle micro. So that means there is no related project to be funded in your area, then you won't get anything. But when you demonstrate capacity for interdisciplinary collaborations, well, then you can do anything. So if there is any project that is health related, you only need to engage one of your fellows that's in the area of health. If it is agri related, you only need to engage, fellows of your center who are in the area of agri or mathematical or engineering related, energy. That is the beauty of demonstrating capacity for interdisciplinary collaborations. So it requires a lot to attract grants, but it's also not difficult to attract grants once you understand the requirement, the philosophy, the psychology of the donor agencies. They want the best, for the fund allocated, right? They want the best outcome for the fund allocated or to be allocated. Requirement for winning research, right? The first, connection with recognized academic or research institutions, whether by studentship, association, or appointment. And this is in terms of ranking, this comes first. When you say ranking of requirements, this comes first. Let me give you an example. World Bank advertising a call that is not targeting any locality. So it's just about quality. And so you have a PhD student applying from Harvard, and then another student from a local university. Apologies to our colleagues who know that. So this is just for a class demonstration. Right? Certainly, the result is known because the student coming from Harvard, the assumption is that certain requirements must have been fulfilled by that guy. Why in terms of his or her exposure, in terms of his or her connection with established researchers, because in any field, if we are talking about ranking of scholars in the world, there's no way you will not find at least one in each of the departments in Harvard and in most of the top universities. So that assumption is there that this student coming from Harvard will have access to several things that a student from a local or primitive university will struggle to, to get. So it is important. So when I say by association, you can write to become a fellow of an established research institute. ARC is one of them. ARC just launched opportunities for fellowship appointments. Go and read about it. ARC just launched that. So you can now become like an associate fellow or researcher. So, different categories of fellowship appointments by ARC now. That's what I'm talking about. So that when you're submitting your profile or your CV to the donor agency, to the prospective donor agency, you also indicated that I'm a fellow of this recognized research institute, or I'm a student of University of Ibadan, or I'm a student of Cambridge University. That in itself is a selling point for you, honestly. So you can't belittle where you are coming from. That is a fact. Okay, so this is one thing. So don't limit your affiliation to the four walls of your university alone, right? You don't say because I'm a postgraduate student of Fountain, so it should strictly be for Fountain. You can also apply to be a fellow of ARC while on a program at Fountain University. You can do the same for any recognized, research institute in the world. There are several of them. And even in Ibadan, our center is also well recognized in Africa, right? It's one of the go-to centers in Africa. So you can apply so that when you are now submitting a proposal, say, I've continued to benefit from the resourcefulness of XYZ Research Institute. That is also good for the profile. Again, because donor agencies, they're also concerned about the potential result to get from the funded project. Okay, they can't handle everything for you, right? They also want you to be responsible for some things that will guarantee quality results. Okay. You also must understand that your research profile should reflect topical issues on, understanding of topical issues. What I mean by that, your research publications. Even your thesis title should reflect, any of the topical issues in your area of research interest. So if you are, if you're interested in monetary economics, or you write on monetary economics, or you write papers related to monetary economics, you must ensure you focus on topical issues in monetary economics. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Rather just writing, about the obvious interest and investment in Nigeria. I mean, except if you are going to be writing something new about the subject, but it's already well debated in the literature, and in fact, discussions are more or less settled. Okay. Also, publication records in reputable, recognized journals and ranked. When I say reputable journals, I'm talking about journals in Science and Red, Taylor and Francis, J. Storr, Springer, Wiley, Emerald, De Gruyter, Sage. More importantly, you must ensure you publish in journals ranked by ABS UK, ABDC Australia, Scopus is global, Web of Science is global. It is always a plus, right? So that when you are, writing your bio, you reflect there that I've published in recognized journals, among which include XYZ. So they know that, wow, because that's also a way of getting mentored, honestly speaking, right? There are several ways of, getting as a graduate student. Publication is one of them. When you submit a paper to a good journal, a minimum of 2 reviewers will be assigned to your paper. Those are your mentors, right, on that paper, because they will advise you on how to polish the paper and make it better, make it publishable. So that's another opportunity. So, but if you send a paper to a predatory journal, you understand, the outcome. There is nothing like mentoring there. You are all alone because it's all about your money. For some good journals, even after paying the submission fee, your paper can still be desk rejected. So you should know that it's your money is just there to defray administrative costs, but they are still concerned about quality. Regardless of the submission fee, your paper is not good enough. For example, in JSTOR, in Science Direct, your paper can be desk rejected. So if it's good enough, your submission fee is also, is saved. Then contribute to that process. Otherwise, it's not, and it's more often than not non-refundable. So target good journals. That will also help you, in your research journey. Also, connection with research networks or platforms that provide relevant statistics for evaluating research quality. What do I mean by this? It's also good to get ranked. What do I mean by that? It's that will also help you, sit up in a balance. So when you know that there's a platform that ranks researchers, for example, in Nigeria, we have Ideas Repec, and you are number 15. So well, you can do better because you are not number 1. Right. If you are number 20, you'll be looking at your friends out there that, wow, Dr. Akin is number 15. So I can do better. Let me keep. So that will always encourage you to do more because you can always track your research performance. In fact, Ideas Repec, the ranking is, I think it's done every month. Yes, every month. So you can easily check your status, your research status every month, at the beginning of every month. And I encourage all of us who are yet to register with that to do so. So that will also help you, to get involved in rigorous research activities. Okay, so we have Scopus, Scopus too. Those that I think for Scopus is once a year. Ranking of scholars is done once a year, but Ideas Repec is every month. Ideas Repec is every month. For Google Scholar, you can see your H index. You can see your number of citations. Right. And so you can then compare your impact factor, for example, with your peers. So you will know whether you are performing well or not. So it's good, right? It helps to push one for quality results. And then membership with relevant associations, right? Nigerian Economic Society, Mathematical Society, American Economic Society. If you are targeting, for example, the US market, then you must be a member of American Economic Society. You must apply formally to be a member. If you are targeting the UK market, then you must be a member of the US Economic Society. If you are targeting the Nigerian market, as I'm talking about, graduate students in economics, right? Or young academics in economics, right? Then you must target Nigerian Economic Society. Other fields too, they have their associations. So I encourage you to join these associations. But in terms of what they contribute, it usually comes last. Connection with recognized academic research institutions, very important. So as a matter of urgency, if you don't belong to one yet, please find a good, well-established, recognized research institute and apply to become a fellow of that organization. It's important. It helps. Now, opportunities for research grant in social and management sciences. There are several organizations that primarily provide grants because that is my, I read economics from first degree to the advanced degrees, including PhD, MSc and PhD, right? I read economics. So this is home for me, right? For those who are not, I will advise you also review, identify potential donor agencies, right? Or grant awarding institutions, okay, in your field. But these institutions, they primarily fund projects that are related to social and management sciences. Okay. So we have African Economic Research Consortium. This is in our field, particularly social and management sciences. This is arguably the biggest think tank in Africa because of the quality of experts, involved, engaged. You'll find Ayete there, you'll find Murundi, you will find Hadri, find even our professors in UI, Professor Ejide, so Ajayi, established scholars in Africa. So you'll find them, without if you are fortunate to attend one of their biannual workshops, at the workshop, you'll find virtually all the collaborators of the organization at a go without breaking a sweat. So that's an opportunity really for mentorship. Okay, so ARC comes first in terms of my preference for grants, particularly for young academics and graduate students. You also have PEP. PEP comes next, Partnership for Economic Policy. ARC is in Kenya. PEP for Africa, because we have PEP International. PEP for Africa is domiciled in Kenya. ARC is also domiciled in Kenya, right? So PEP offers generous grants as well, like ARC. Okay. We also have Codestria. Codestria is target more of social science research, right? But PEP and ARC, they are broader in scope, right? We also have the African Development Bank. let's quickly run through these institutions, their requirements. You know, the African Economic Research Consortium, it has three components, basically: research, training, and policy outreach. And it also offers several grants to support academics, graduate students, and researchers. So research proposals for grants are, so you can, like I said, I said that previously, that ARC encourages this supply-driven, approach. If you have any brilliant idea, develop it, ensure it is well articulated, motivation is clear enough, contribution is well conceptualized, and then send it. Put everything there and send it to ARC. ARC will carefully review the proposal, and you get a response, whether, it is good enough for funding or not. If it's good enough for funding, they will give you a comment to revise the proposal and make it more readable and more acceptable. Right. Research proposals must address any of the thematic areas of ARC. Okay. And there are also frequent calls for expression of interest. So two things are involved for ARC: demand driven and supply. I hope you know what I mean by that. Demand in the sense that, frequently too, you get calls for specific, for targeted projects, right? Targeted projects. So you check and you see whether, any of the course aligns, with your areas of research or with your profile. So if it is positive, then you apply. I encourage you to frequently check the organization's website for updates on grant related. ARC is really generous in terms of research grants. I can tell you this for free because I benefited from the platform. Even last year, I was engaged as a consultant for the organization. And the training was the training targeted over 30 countries in Africa. And it was, like a hybrid program, virtual and physical. That was there in Kenya to teach physically, but we also allowed our graduate students and young academics to participate online. So please, this should be one of the go-to think tanks in Africa if you're applying for research grants. In fact, there's a platform for PhD thesis grants. There's a window for that. So ARC has a space for, supporting PhD thesis grants. So I encourage our graduate students here. They have a good, you think your thesis, the thesis, is good enough for research grant. But always first check the thematic areas of ARC, about 5 of them, please. Go online and check and be sure that your thesis is tied to one of the thematic areas. The next is PEP. Said, I've benefited from the two organizations, so I can say a lot about the two of them, both ARC and PEP. Okay. PEP is a network of institutions. We have PEP International, we have PEP, although PEP is for Global South, basically, Global South. But the one for Africa is domiciled in Kenya. Okay. I encourage you to apply for membership. PEP encourages that a lot. And being a member, I think it is free. It is free. So just go online and then check the requirements for becoming a member of PEP. If there's any opportunity, the opportunity will first be launched among the network, it will first be sent to the network members. So, and so that means members are more likely to benefit more from the organization's grant than, others who are not members. Okay, so for developing countries, including Nigeria, and it is a Southern-led global organization dedicated to supporting development in the Global South. And so what is this telling you? Your research project must focus on Global South-related problems. All right. So you can't be talking about economic policy uncertainty in the US and you want PEP to fund it. PEP is not going to fund that kind of project. PEP will only fund projects that are related to the Global South. And that was problems that, that are peculiar to the Global South. You have to join the network, like I said, to benefit from its funding opportunities. There are frequent calls too for expression of interest and submission of side proposals on topic. So check, again, just like ARC, I encourage you to frequently check the interest rate. PEP offers generous funding support. I can tell you this for free. Okay, so always check, okay, for opportunities. There's also the African Development Bank, but this is usually, very highly competitive. There are several. I've also benefited from African Development Bank, right? But you really have to be strong to be able to attract grants from African Development Bank, because African Development Bank more or less, considers scholars with strong credentials. Yes, that's one thing about it. Especially if there's any specific program for young scholars. I know they have a young scholar program, something, except for programs of that nature. Otherwise, if you check the FDB website, you will see call for expression of interest for individual scholars, individual researchers or consultants, and for institutional, projects. Okay. So this one will require some level of collaboration among scholars. Yes, to be able to attract something meaningful. Or if a young academic, I was saying academic now, let me just say, if a researcher intends to attract grants from this, I would advise the person should first check the requirements and see if there's an opportunity to involve a mentor, right? Although they will say individual consultants, right? If some level of collaboration can be accommodated, right, it will really be good. Right? So that can also facilitate the consideration of the application. If you don't have, strong credentials to attract grants from AFDB, it's usually very competitive, very, very competitive to attract grants from the African Development Bank. The services are periodically publicized on the bank's website. Prior experience, like I said, a major requirement. So they are looking for experts, not really, upcoming, experts, upcoming researchers. So organizations that offer institutional research grants, quite a number of them. My center has benefited from, I think, 3 of them. MacArthur Foundation, yes, my center, SIA. Also, Fund Foundation, yes, SIA has benefited from each of them. MasterCard is also another good organization that offers institutional research grants, generous grants to research institutions. There's also the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, also for institutional research grants. Okay, and the World Bank. They have also benefited from the World Bank grant, but in the form of consultancy. Right. Okay. So, but these organizations typically offer grants or offer institutional research grants. So they identify institutions. And institutions can also, for example, Fountain can write a proposal to the World Bank, right, asking for support, funding support. But the organization, the institution has to be clear about the purpose for the grants and how that aligns with the vision of the donor agency. That is very crucial because everything is tied to what the donor agency represents or what the organization represents. So MacArthur Foundation, right, based in Chicago, but has locations in India and Nigeria. Okay. And like I said, generous funding opportunities to institutions, very, very generous. There's a center in, in UI, Center for Energy Economics Law, and, the establishment of the center was funded by MacArthur Foundation. I don't have to mention the amount, quite huge. But again, it should be about solving real life problems. And these problems should align with areas of interest of the donor institutions should align with the vision that that the vision or the mission of this is to enhance blah blah blah. So if it's about poverty reduction, then you should be writing something that's poverty related. If it's about sustainable development, then you should know your proposal should reflect some environmental issues, climate change, things like that. Otherwise, there will be no basis for considering your proposal for the grant. So, MacArthur Foundation is a very good donor organization for supporting research. We also have Ford Foundation, and please, fund is now disconnected. It's no longer connected with the Ford Motor Company. I hope you know that. But people often say, "Why is that?" It used to be, but it's now like it is a distinct entity. Okay, so it has a country office in Nigeria, right? And it also offers general grants who have benefited from the grant as a center, not as an individual for the foundation. So, it is the process is quite comprehensive, rigorous, because you have to demonstrate capacity to execute the project. Just demonstrate that your project aligns with the vision, the mission of the organization, and you have to demonstrate that you'll be able to complete the program in the timeline is not really the requirement anyway, but demonstration of strong credentials to manage the fund, demonstration of capacity to execute the project. These two are very crucial, and then demonstration of the relevance of the proposed project to the theme or the vision, mission of the organization. We also have the Mastercard Foundation. It has office in 8 countries, including Nigeria. Some people don't know about this. So these, organizations, they have, country office in Nigeria, right? So it would be nice for some of us, although the process can be rigorous because they don't offer grant like small grant like 10,000, 20,000. Some of them, they offer grants as huge as $1.5 million. So you really have to be strong to be able to attract grants from these organizations, right? You really have, so you need to assemble established scholars. That doesn't mean that young academics cannot get involved, but that's also a way of mentoring them, building them to be able to attract grants of this nature in the near future, right? But these institutions fund essentially big projects. MacArthur Foundation, as huge as $2 million. Mastercard Foundation. In fact, Mastercard is working with ARC now for a targeted PhD program for female scholars in Africa. And this is running, I'm not talking about a project of 10 million. It's hundreds of billions of dollars, right? So those are the kind of engagement that some of these institutions they get involved in. We also have the African Development Bank. They are offering research opportunities for capacity building activities, research, policy advocacy, right? Again, this is not usually African Development Bank invite institutions to apply for grants of this nature, right? So it would be nice to check relevant information on the bank's website for the funding opportunities. Okay. So let's look at a template for grant winning proposals. A template for grant winning proposals. First, any grant awarding institution usually describes how the proposal should be prepared. Okay? But that doesn't mean that, you cannot, for example, for the supply, driven, approach, where you'll be the one to develop the proposal after identifying the problem, and then using the proposal to target the problem for, for results. Okay. So, that means we can have, that's a typical outline, right? I call that minimum requirements when you are developing a research proposal for grants. Okay, so for a typical outline, what comes first is the title. What comes first is the title. Next is the abstract, tentative abstract, because you are still proposing. But that doesn't mean that you cannot also highlight potential outcomes of your research. Introduction, okay? That's after, the abstract page. Literature review, okay? Stylized fact, which is also referred to as background to the study. That is, in fact, very important for applied research. Applied research. Then research methodology. Okay, that's also important. You have to be clear about the framework to be adopted for the execution of the project. So we are convinced that you can actually execute the project. Without the methodology, I mean, it's just it's still hanging there. They are not sure about your capacity to execute the project. Work plan, dissemination of research findings. You have to tell us, you have to indicate your proposal, how you intend to disseminate the research findings. Most donor institutions, they have their own way of disseminating research findings. But if you are, so this is like a comprehensive outline, right? So you're writing a proposal to an organization for funding, not that there's a specific call that you are responding to, okay? And then the conclusion with references. Let's start with the title page. Title page, the proposed title, list of authors, and authors' affiliations. Okay, I'm using authors because these days, particularly if it is not a grant meant for PhD thesis, what I encourage is multiple authored research projects. What I mean by that is having multiple authors, right? Rather than a single author research proposal. Multiple authors will allow you to also collaborate with established or senior academics, established researchers or senior academics. That can also facilitate the consideration of your application. Okay. The next, abstract. The abstract should cover the main abstract and then keywords. I'll say come back to the details of all this. Okay. We'll say come back to all of them. Then next is introduction. That is labeled as section 1. Okay, what are the components here? What are the things to consider on that introduction? Research problem. So you have to be clear about the problem. An example, one of the proposals being considered by the African Bank, having a GVAD toolkit. We are talking about our center, my center, developing a GVAD toolkit for Africa. There is none for now. If you check the global VAR, you only find emerging and developed economies, about 33 of them. And only one country out of over 50 countries in Africa, only one country is represented. Only one country is represented, and that is South Africa. So that means if you want to do a GVAR analysis for Africa, it is, for now, it is practically impossible. So we are saying, and Africa is one of the recipients of global shocks, if not the most, vulnerable to global shock. There are global shocks. Africa appears to be the most vulnerable. East Asia now very, relatively resilient to global shocks, but Africa no. Right. So, and GVAR is meant to facilitate the analysis of global shocks, global regional shocks. Unfortunately, the continent is not represented. We have just a country which cannot mirror all the countries in Africa. Which cannot mirror all the countries. I'm not just talking about Southern Africa. I'm talking about all the countries, including, the northern part of Africa. Right. So that's a big problem. So that's a problem, that we have identified. And we are saying we'll be happy, and the donor agency identified to fund the project. Essentially, in fact, part of its mandate is to conduct policy outreach that will transcend a single country in Africa. So that means our GVAR problem, identifying that donor agency, to help us fund the project that will help us, resolve the problem is best suited, right, for the project. In other words, because the organization focuses on African-wide issues, and so targeting that organization, for that kind of project, is valid. Okay, so again, you must identify potential institutions or potential donor agencies or donor organizations to fund your research project. And then when you are writing your proposal, you must ensure the problem is well articulated. And also the gap well conceptualized. The problem is no GVAR toolkit, right, for Africa. The research gap is there is no study that covers African countries in global shock analysis within the GVAR framework. Okay, that's the gap. And so from there, you can identify the research objectives. And then the last structure of the proposal. The last one is optional. It's optional. Okay. So after section 1, you move to literature review. Okay. Literature review. For the literature review, you identify related literature right from seminar papers. This is very important when you are conducting literature review. This is very important. What do I mean by this? You will find that in most of the empirical studies, certain papers, feature prominently. Those papers are considered as influential papers, seminar papers. That is how to identify seminar papers. That's on this subject. If you download 100 papers, you'll find these influential papers cited prominently in virtually all of the 100 papers. That's what I'm talking about. That's how to identify seminar papers. All right. So you start with the seminar papers. That will help you identify, and then you connect their contributions with the recent publications. With that, you are able to understand the progression, right? And that, on that subject over time. Okay, the contributions of researchers right from the beginning, right from the first paper to the most recent, and then from there you can easily tease out the gap in the literature. The last one is usually is optional, depending on the requirements of the of the donor organization, okay, where you are required to submit to present the result, but it's optional. You don't have to, right? If the review is properly conducted, you don't need a separate, a distinct table repeating what you have already, what you have in the discussion of the related literature. The third section should focus on some stylized facts. This is where you now use data to discuss expected outcomes from analysis, or to even understand the subject matter using data rather than relying on empirical studies. So this is more or less this about data. Methodology, there are 3 ways depending on the nature of the research project. Okay. So if the subject is quantitative, then use quantitative research method. Okay. If the subject matter is qualitative in nature, then use quantitative research method. Okay. An example of quantitative, you are looking at monetary policy and rising inflation in Nigeria. Both are quantitative. You don't need any quantitative method to collect data on inflation. You don't need any qualitative method to collect data on NPR. But if you are looking at household level analysis, that may be qualitative because, for example, we are saying effect of subsidy removal, right, on energy consumption at the household level. We cannot, from our Afees statistics, measure energy consumption. You will need some level of quantitative research methods to elicit information. Right, from relevant units, right? If we are dealing with households, from relevant households. We are dealing with firms, from firms. Okay, because those things are not directly measurable by just visiting the official website of MBS, for example, in Nigeria, the website of the Afees statistics, the organization that is meant to publish official statistics for the country. So where you now have to use some instrument to elicit information, that will require some level of quantitative research approach. And you can also have the mixed research method, combination of both qualitative and quantitative, right? I will say come back to these methods. And then the work plan. You highlight the work schedule over the period of the subject. You have to be clear about that, because if it is supply-oriented, except where the organization specifically says that the project can spill over to another year, I will advise you limit it to the fiscal year within which that project is being funded. You know why? Everything is budgeted for most of the big organizations. So if the grant has been awarded to you within that space, they are telling you that it's because there's a budget for it for that fiscal year. So whatever thing you want to do, ensure it is completed within that fiscal year. Unless they advise otherwise, that it can spill over to another fiscal year. Because they cannot guarantee that the same item will be captured in another budget, or the budget for the following fiscal year. Okay, so the next is dissemination of research findings. That is where you suggest how the findings will be disseminated. We'll still come back to this too. And then budget if requested. Really, the approach is to first send, so it's to first develop a concept note. And now I'm focusing on the self-supply oriented. Now you send a concept note. Concept notes usually, will not exceed 3 pages maximum. Maximum 3 pages. That is more or less like an expression of interest. And so you just write an extended abstract with relevant sections, an extended abstract with relevant sections. The problem, objective, and then deliverables, the 3 items. And then the profile of the research team. That's all. So If they are interested in the project, you will now be required to develop fully a proposal, to develop a full proposal, which will now have all these components, sections 1 to 6. But again, don't include the budget yet. Have a conversation with them before you begin to, because that can also, they will tell you if there is a provision for the project. So there's a provision for the project, then you'll be advised to present your budget, to submit the budget proposal. So budget 2 has some proposal, so we call it budget proposal. And so that's a scale on its own, how to prepare a budget for research grants, where it is requested. But for the demand-oriented, there's no time for you, there's no space for you to negotiate. They tell you it is $10,000, like ARC, this is grants, $10,000. So there's nothing like, they only tell you to, to justify, we call it retirement of expenses. So you've got to, So you provide all the necessary receipts and then to retire expenses. Okay. Then conclusion. Summary of this should be 6, it should be 7. So conclusion, summary of the proposal. We'll come back to this. And then the references where all the cited papers are referenced, are captured using relevant bibliographic details. Let's now take each in turn. Okay, title page. For the title page, what are you expected to consider? Choosing a title. Be specific and indicate accurately the subject. Okay? You have to be specific. Don't avoid writing a note as a title. The effect of energy consumption in Nigeria during financial crisis and this, and after the fuel subsidy removal, blah, blah. No, don't need that. Be specific. Indicate accurately the subject and scope of the project. I'm going to I'll give relevant examples. And then what next? Okay, come in. Good. Reflect the motivation for the study, even in the title. Reflect the motivation for the study. Okay, let me give you an example. Developing a GVAL toolkit for Africa. Developing a GVAL toolkit for Africa. Now, the scope is captured. The scope is Africa. The subject is GVAL. The motivation is that we are developing. So that means there is none. When you say you are developing something, that means there is none in existence. So that's what I'm talking about. It is short, but comprehensive, but detailed. Yes, let me put that way. Concise, but informative. Developing a GVAL toolkit for Africa. The subject is GVAL. The scope is Africa. The motivation lies in the use of the word developing. Right. That means even in the title, the contribution in a way is captured. Developing. That means there's a problem already. There is none in existence. That means there's a gap already. There is none in existence. So the title is short, but it has all the components, required for a well conceptualized or structured title. You can also try to make a statement or ask a question. Like, does fuel subsidy removal affect inflation? Does fuel subsidy removal affect inflation? Okay, a case study of Nigeria. So now there's a question. And that question is also informative in a way. We are looking at the problem is there. That's the motivation. We are saying if you remove subsidy, will it affect inflation? Right. That is the problem. The scope is Nigeria. The subject is fuel subsidy. Fuel subsidy removal. Is it good to remove subsidy or not? And how do we expect inflation to respond? So it is also encouraged to phrase a title in that form. Also, now things to avoid. Avoid using abbreviations, except for the standard abbreviations. May I mention that for the demand-oriented, in some instances, a title, can be suggested, right? So you can't do anything. You can, except if you are strong enough to convince them why the title should be modified. Because the focus is to fund a project for the identified title, or provide research grants for the identified project title. So you cannot really do anything to change that, except if you are strong enough, you are an established researcher and saying, why not look at it this way? As long as it will not affect the final outcome, the focus for raising that kind of call. Avoid using abbreviations except for the standard abbreviations like the US, UK, EU, and regional blocks like BRICS. You can use BRICS in a title. It's acceptable. You don't have to write European Union in full. The short form is also recognized. But you don't say you want to write Nigeria and you write it as NIG. That is not recognized. Or NGR, it is also not recognized. Or Niger, it is not recognized. Please, you don't say, why not? You are not there yet. That's a fact. So follow the standard abbreviations if you have to. Otherwise, avoid the use of abbreviations in a title. Use words that create a positive impression and stimulate readers' interest. More importantly, readers' interest. Right. Okay, so it shouldn't be about attacking, someone, it can be your government, it can be, so it is, you are a scholar, you are a scientist. Yours is to provide data, provide data that will lead to empirical evidence, then to policy decisions. So you don't write like a journalist, you write like a scholar. So you can't be biased right from your title. Don't sound that way. You sound like a scholar that, based on my data, based on my empirical evidence, subsidy removal can fuel, inflation, or can raise the level of consumer prices. So that's how to write. Don't say subsidy removal is bad for Nigeria and the government. No. You write as a scholar because your position should be evidence-based. You can't, don't be necessarily judgmental. You used quality data to come up with relevant policy options or recommendations, policy decisions, right? So that's the idea, that's the intuition behind creating a positive impression that I'm unbiased. On the basis of our data, Mr. President, I'm not sure if your choice of subsidy removal or your approach is good for inflation. That is how to write. And so that's because people often get it wrong with this positive impression thing. It's a way of saying that you are writing a paper that should educate us, not writing a political, report that will show some level of sentiment about the subject matter, that will show, some sentiment about your preference or your bias, regarding that, the subject in question. Then consider including the independent variable and dependent variable, if possible, where you are looking at an empirical, question. or an empirical hypothesis. Empirical hypothesis, right? It can be dependent variable and independent. And if possible, the outcome, if it is straightforward. Okay? If possible, the outcome. Use current nomenclature from the field of study. Yes, current nomenclature. What I mean by every field has its own language. Every field has its own language. So you have to use the appropriate, language. Okay? When writing. If it's economics, we have our language. If it's accounting, they have their language. Finance. So you write even as a graduate student, that should be part of your training. Okay? You must understand how to use the language of your field. It is English, but it has its own way of connecting with, its audience, right? So, listing of authors. These days, particularly for research grants, except for demand-oriented research where the focus is on individual researchers. Otherwise, as I said previously, learn to collaborate with your colleagues. Don't conduct research alone, or don't write research proposal alone. You benefit from the resourcefulness of the team rather than limiting the scope to yourself alone, right? Or to what you have in mind. So collaboration enriches the content of a proposal, honestly speaking, because you are getting ideas from colleagues or possibly diverse backgrounds where it's interdisciplinary in nature. Like at our center, we have statisticians, we have agricultural economists, we have mainstream economists, we have accountants, we have scholars from banking and finance. That is the nature of the center. That's the way the center is structured, is designed, right? Interdisciplinary in nature. And if you check my papers in the last 10 years, you will say myself and a statistician, myself and somebody in the area of finance, So that's what we encourage at our center. So attracting grants really is something that we enjoy a lot. So the average number of authors for a typical research proposal is 3. Typically, yes. Okay. Typically speaking, we expect that you have at least 3 authors. 1 as the principal investigator and the 2 as members of the research team. Okay. Typically, you have 3. And also, the concern is how should authors be ordered, right, for a proposed project. Okay. This issue becomes more critical if the final report is expected to be published, right? If you are publishing a paper, you have to provide, the list of authors. So how do you do this? The common methods. We start with relative contribution. As the name implies, this is about looking at individual contributions. In fact, most journal archives, particularly Science Direct, Wiley, and Springer, they now request for authors' credits, right? Authors' contributions. Okay, so from there we can easily see that. So the understanding is that the first author has the highest contributions to that project. Then in descending order. So that means second author will have less contributions than the first. Third, we have less than the first and second. So in descending order, that's the way it is done. So it's encouraged that transparency note is included to highlight expected contribution of the authors, but this is optional. It's optional. So areas to look out, to consider when determining contributions of authors. Conceptualization, methodology, software, validation, form analysis, even project administration and funding. you can have one of the authors, right, who will assist push for the grant, perhaps because of his connection with the grant awarding institution. So yeah, so researchers have different roles to play, right, in a research project or when developing a research proposal. So it's not just about everybody cannot be involved in writing. So, and that's what I'm saying. You can have, among the authors, one who will be dealing with editing. So the fellow will wait for all of you to write everything and then do the formal editing. No, and it will not handle the formal editing. Okay, and then also for supervision, you can have the principal investigator can just leave the proposal to the members of the team to write, and then they will supervise and then rewrite if we are necessary. So people have different roles to play. For example, also for form analysis, where you are writing a proposal, the guy that will do analysis has no role to play yet. But if the proposal is eventually approved for funding, the modeler in that group will have a role to play, but not at the stage of, well, maybe for the methodology section where the research design will have to be discussed. Methods of analysis will also have to be discussed. Perhaps that will be the only part the modeler will cover in the proposal. So it's just so we must understand, the different roles that researchers have to play, whether in writing a concept note, in writing a proposal, or in executing a project. So all of us cannot be involved in writing. There's a part for data creation where one person will have to download all the data required. That's also a contribution, so that we don't get it wrong with the contributions that everybody must write, everybody must validate, everybody must do analysis, everybody must supervise. No, it's not possible. You can have just one person. It's not good in research, but he knows how to make contact to attract grants. People are good in marketing, so to speak. Say, I know that CBN, we can write to the governor. The governor will be interested in funding a project of this nature. By virtue of his membership or of his contact, of his connection, we can leverage and then attract the grants. So there are different roles for research projects. An illustration. Okay, for a 3-authored research proposal, you can have this. Afees, Salisu, let's say we are writing a research proposal, the 3 of us, Afees, Salisu, Rogan Gupta, and Paresh Narayan. This is the way it is done. Afees, Salisu will highlight his own contributions. Rogan too will do the same. And then Paresh Narayan. So you can see from here the components of Afees' contribution, the component here for Rogan, and then the components for Paresh. Okay, that's how to, for relative contributions. Then another approach is alphabetical list. So if a particular group, you belong to a group where you regularly write together. So that means one person cannot be the first author throughout, except where you just, the idea is to consider relative contributions. So that may be valid. But where you feel, well, everybody must benefit from the research in terms of the way the authors are ordered, then in that instance, you can follow the alphabetical list. But you have to be careful. So let me give an example. I have Afees, Salisu, and then Taufik Ayinde. For alphabetical list, Taufik Ayinde will always come last. Because Taufik, T being the first letter. Afees will always come first. Okay, even if we try to, so that means in that instance, we can say, for this paper, we use our first name, right, to list. And then maybe for another paper, we use our last name. So that means for Afees, Salisu, and Taufik Ayinde, if you are using the first name, Afees will come first for that paper. If you are using last name, Ayinde will come first. Because Ayinde, that's his last name. So A, my last name S. So it is better. But for some names like Zainab Salisu and Afees Salisu. So what do you do in that instance? That will take us to another concept. Multiple first authors. Okay? Afees Salisu, Zainab Salisu, and we are using our last name. So Salisu Salisu. That we can then inform the journal that both of us would like to be first authors, the two of us. So you provide an additional note explaining that. That notwithstanding, the person that comes first is seen as the first author. Who cares about the explanatory note? But it's just that this is also allowed. That's what I'm saying, it's allowed. But technically speaking, or practically speaking, people say the first as the first author, regardless of the aesthetic, to show that there are multiple authors. You can also have multiple last authors. If you have about 10 and then the last 5 contributions marginal, maybe the last 5 were involved in data curation, so they did exactly the same, more or less the same job for that paper. So you can say all the last 5 did data curation, and so they were assigned the same weight. So you can take all of them to be multiple last authors. So it's allowed. Again, the last person is the last person in the to the readers. These days people really read footnotes, but it's always good to put it that if that's the preference of the research team. Okay, this is the most popular in most parts of the world, right? Or let me say this part of the world. Okay, I'm talking about Africa or developing countries. Negotiated order. For example, if you have like 5, you can easily determine the first and the last, right? But how do you determine the authors in between? That is really difficult, honestly. So like I said here, there are clearer practices for designing first, so designating first and last. But to determine those in between is really not as straightforward as you think. We know this, of course. So what do? You can negotiate that, please let me come third, and then if you are able to convince your research other members, yeah, you can have your way. So the research order is good. But this is my proposal, particularly for young academics or younger colleagues. You don't wait until the research proposal is finalized before you decide on author's order. Be clear. So if I'm the one bringing the proposal to the team, say, this is my proposal, but I want you to join me on this project. That means it is my project. And I'll be ready to also facilitate how we attract grants. So I can come first. And then I can assign tasks to other members of the team. So be clear about this, because some researchers, they tend to avoid their colleagues because of this problem of listing of authors. But people don't like to discuss it. But that's the real problem of collaboration here inside collaboration from inside of the world. Right? Feel that guy who wants to go, I don't want him to lead. And then you can benefit from him. So what? Because of the way he feels authors should be ordered, say no, I can't pop. So it's always good. Have an understanding. That, okay, for this paper, let me come first. You know why? Because I'll be handling XYZ. And more importantly, I'm targeting something here, and this paper, will play a big role. It's always, negotiated order is good. Negotiated order helps a lot. So have a conversation with your team members. It helps a lot, rather than avoiding those that will help you because of, how you feel, authors should be ordered. And then, your preference does not seem to align with most of your colleagues. And then you avoid them because of that. That is not really, it's not professional enough. Come out, just explain your opinion and then try to convince them, because you need them, to build a strong profile for yourself. If you are dealing with established researchers, it depends, right, on the goal of your collaboration. If it's about mentoring to have you publish in good journals, the established researcher will know when to do the right thing, except if that person is selfish, So, because whether you like it or not, we have some level of politics in even academic publications. An example, if you are writing with Stiglitz, for example, regardless of the content, because of the visibility of Stiglitz, editor is likely going to be biased. Because if somebody is good, he's good. So in fact, writing a paper to the journal is a major contribution. It's adding the value being added is huge. That Stiglitz is publishing in my journal. So you would not want to reject that kind of paper. That's what I'm talking about. So in that instance, you want Stiglitz to confess so that the editor can say that Stiglitz is involved. That's the kind of, so it depends on the kind of collaboration you are doing. So if the collaboration is to leverage the visibility of the established researcher, you have to also get noticed with time. Then you always want to allow the person to confess, because you know that will help you open doors for more opportunities. Okay, the use of institutional affiliations. Now we have to, particularly for our graduate students, don't get it wrong. You are a student, you are a lecturer in Fountain, and you are doing your PhD in UI. If you are going to publish your thesis, ordinarily you should carry 2 affiliations. You shouldn't carry the affiliation of your place of employment alone. That will be unethical, because 2 institutions are responsible for the thesis in a way. Your place of employment, where you get the fund from to fund the money from to fund your program, and then the school that is building your capacity that through that program. So if it's about your thesis, then it should carry at least 2 organizations. Now, if the project is now being funded by ARC, it's certainly going to certainly carry 3 affiliations: your place of employment, your school, and the funding organization. In fact, for some funding organizations, they will tell you must, as a matter of policy, include that association as one of the affiliations. And in fact, in some cases, the only affiliation. But for a graduate student, I know some of them are very generous. You use your school as one of the affiliations, as well as that of the donor agency. But where you are employed in an academic institution, then it will be 3. Which one should come first depends on the level of the contributions of the 3 institutions. If the thesis is being 100% funded by a particular, let's say ARC, then it will come next after your school, the school awarding the degree. The school awarding the degree comes first, as long as it has to do with the thesis, your thesis. Publications after your program that are related to your thesis should not carry the affiliation of your school where you obtain the degree from. Should not. After your program. But during that program, and it's coming from the thesis, the school awarding the degree should come first. Next will now be the funding agency. If it is fully funded by the organization, let's say ARC. But if it is partially funded, then that your place of employment has a role to play in that regard. Then it should come next after that of your school awarding the degree. Then the funding agency will come last. Otherwise, it will be the funding agency, then your place of employment. So in that instance, you have 3. For those who are not employed in an academic institution, then it will be 2. Or just 1 if it is not funded, it is self-funded. So to just be your school, the school awarding the degree. Don't put your residential address because your parents are responsible for the program. They are the one funding the program. Don't put that. It's not acceptable. It is not an academic institution. So you don't say, since the prof said the person funded too has a role to play. So in this case, my dad. So I would then put your University of Ibadan, and then your residential address, the address of your household address. Don't do that, please. That is not acceptable. Okay. So you can have, in my case, I'm not, I'm the current director of SEA, and I'm holding, and also I will have with the University of Pretoria. So when I write, you'll find at least 2 affiliations, except where the paper is being funded by another organization. You will see the organization there. Maybe one organization in Vietnam or France or UK, you'll find it there. So you will see SEA and University of Pretoria for most of my papers, or SEA and another funding organization if Pretoria is not involved. Right. Okay. Now, affiliation should indicate the institutions at the point of drafting the proposal. And this can change. The institutions may change once the proposal is approved for funding, depending on where the project will take place. In other words, when you're writing a proposal, It's just be, for example, I work at SIA. So if I'm writing a proposal to African Bank, for example, it just carries SIA. Once the project is approved for funding by Afees, and Afees is saying you have to relocate to Cairo, where it is domiciled, to complete the program, to complete the project, then the affiliation, the affiliations will now change to, it won't change. I will have to now include Afees Bank as another affiliation. So it will be SIA and Afees. It depends on where the project will take place, like I said. So the official email accounts of the authors, the corresponding author, where you have more than one author. Okay. That's so when I say corresponding author, after listing all the them, the last part to now carry the correspondence, because the funding agencies cannot be dealing with all the authors. So typically, the principal investigator is usually the corresponding author. The principal investigator is usually the corresponding author, where you have more than one author on the project. The abstract. Abstract, short, with insightful statement, informative, statement, right? And then she'll cover the main points. And abstract should come after the title page. You all know this. It should not exceed 150 words, except where stated. Otherwise, that it's should get to 500. Some will tell you you can have an extended abstract as a concept note. So that can run up to like 750 words. Okay. So that's not a typical, that's just like an extended abstract. It's a form of concept note. Okay, concept note. Abstract for any applied research proposal should reflect the following: motivation. So when I say motivation, I'm talking about what is the problem. In our proposal to Afees Bank, we indicated the first line. There is no GVAL data to analyze international and regional shock spillovers to Africa. That is the problem. That is the problem. Expected outcome will be to develop a GVAL toolkit for Africa. That is the delivery. When I say that, we're talking about deliverables. Yeah. Okay, so that's the outcome. Policy implications. The GVAL toolkit will be, applied to Africa to demonstrate its usefulness for policy and practice. It's part of the things that we intend to do once the proposal is approved for funding. Okay, so be clear. Problem should come first, and that problem should align. Should speak to should highlight something that will interest the donor agency. And how do you know this? Go and read about the donor agency very well. The philosophy of the donor agency, the mission, the vision, research themes of interest to the intending, funding agency. Okay. So again, ensure it does not exceed 250. These days, people are very busy. People really have the time to even read, a full paper. So keep it simple, keep it short. Keywords should come after the abstract, and the keywords should not exceed 6 words. 6. And the 6 words must be captured in the abstract. The 6 words must be captured in the abstract. So the abstract it will be a concise, representation of the proposal or concept notes. Now, do not add information, things to avoid. Do not add information not contained in the abstract. You are drawing from the abstract. So don't say anything that you can't find in the abstract. Avoid use of abbreviations unless you are using abbreviations understood by the audience. For example, EU, UK, right? You don't write Africa. You don't say AF for Africa. No. Write it the way people understand it. Okay? Avoid background information, literature review, detailed description. Don't avoid all these things because there's a section for each of these concepts in the proposal. So avoid literature review. You don't say the gap is drawn from XYZ papers. It's not necessary. Just state the problem and how you intend to deal with the problem, to resolve the problem in the in the proposal, right, in the abstract, right? That once the project is approved, this is the way the problem will be resolved. That's all we need, and the methodology to be used. If you are clear about the methodology. Avoid tables, graphs in the abstract, except where a graphical abstract is specifically requested. Some, some journals now even accept graphical abstract. Well, for proposal, it is not necessary. Okay. So let's move to, but yes, for keywords, technically, we say it should follow lowercase unless the keyword is a proper noun, like Nigeria, and capital. Otherwise, lowercase for all. Okay. Ensure all the keywords are captured in the abstract. I said this, and the keyword should not exceed 5, 6, minimum 3, maximum 4. Okay. Let me skip this introduction. This section is the most important of the proposal, right? And it also offers an insight into the richness of the originality. Now, things to consider for introduction. Broad concept of the study and motivation, that is background, and problem. Motivation is the problem, not the contribution. And then research questions and their relevance. It's important. You raise some questions. And you don't just raise the questions, you also explain why the research questions are important, right, in the proposal. And also highlight the expected contribution of the study to the literature. What is new in the study relative to the, the country, in focus. So you have to be clear about the contribution. Motivation is different from contribution. Please note this. Motivation is the problem, what we refer to as research problem or problem statement, statement of the problem, right? That's motivation. Contribution is identifying the gap in the literature and making a statement about how the study intends to contribute to the literature. Please consult the following publishers for research motivation and contribution. Science Direct. So if you don't have access to this, then you are not ready to do quality research. That is a fact. You don't download papers from Google Scholar, because Google Scholar, archives all kinds of journals, including predatory journals. Again, Google Scholar, you'll find on your, you check Google, you check any Google Scholar page, there's no restriction in terms of, the journals, as long as the paper is available online, whether it's a predatory journal or not. Google Scholar would pick it as long as it's available online. But Science Direct, the process is quite rigorous. It's really, on average, it is really rigorous. You really have to be strong to publish in Science Direct. Ditto for Taylor and Francis, Wiley, Springer, J. Stolman, and Sage. These are standard. So before you even start thinking about attracting any grants, this should serve as your input. And this should be your minimum. This should be your minimum. So if you are well informed, writing, identifying the research gap is going to be very easy if you are well informed as a researcher. Otherwise, you will just be talking about something that's already set, that is settled already in the literature. You'll be talking about something that is already debated and settled in the literature. Okay, so please, you need Fountain University as a university should have access to the following, to these journal archives. That's a way of encouraging the graduates and young researchers to get involved. And of course, for all the universities represented here, it's important. You can't give what you don't have. Research is input output. You are mentored by the kind of paper. I told you about the peer review process being a mentoring process. Yes. So if you send a paper to a creative journal, there's nobody mentors you there. So you write. We are mentored by the kind of papers we read. If you read good papers, you write like them. If you read papers in creative journals, you are likely going to write like those authors in creative journals. That's a challenge. Okay, so access to this should be the first preliminary step towards attracting good grants. Oh yes, in fact, some reviewers of these applications or experts consulted to review submissions for research grants, they check, including myself. I will go to a reference section and check to check the quality of papers used in writing the proposal. I will check the quality of paper. In fact, this also extends to, because I'm an editor of about 3 journals. This extends to, publications, acceptance of papers for publication. I'll first check your reference section to see the quality of papers used in writing the paper. So it's important, please, colleagues. Let's move to literature review. Now, the focus of your review should be determined by the research questions. Okay, if the research question is about first subsidy, then your literature review should focus on that. There is no time for any historical perspective to the issue. There's no space for that in a proposal. There's no space. Go straight to the point. The reviewers don't have time to be reading relevant information, relevant discussions. Please, straight to the point, and should focus on the main subject. Okay, so I said some institutions may require that the review be embedded in section 1 rather than creating a separate section. Please note this. So where you are required to just motivate your paper by reviewing the literature, then you don't need to create a separate section for the literature review. You don't need to do so. That is not required. Otherwise, so where there is no definite structure, then you can include this section. But you really have to be careful. As I said previously, the focus should be about identifying seminar contributions. But these so-called seminar papers, they are not, the authors ordinarily will not describe those papers as being seminal. So how do you know they are truly seminal or they are influential? You know when you download papers on the subject, related papers on the subject, you will say that this set of names will continue to feature prominently in the downloaded papers. So when you see names like that are more prominently captured in the literature, you should know they are influential. So that's how to identify seminar contributions. So you should start with seminal contributions. Okay, so and then trace the evolution of the subject to the current development, to the recent development. Okay, and so that will help you understand the intuition behind the concept right from the seminar papers to how the current publications view the subject matter. Okay, now when you are organizing literature review, you ensure that it is done thematically. You focus on the previous literature, you identify gaps. When you do seminal and current, you will see the gap in the literature. And then you indicate how your project intends to close to fill the gap. Please avoid, I always say this, don't create distinct sections for theoretical literature, empirical literature, and methodological. It doesn't make sense, right? If your work is empirical, the literature review should be empirical. If your work is methodological, the literature review should be methodological. You don't have to create distinct sections for, as captured on my screen, please. Literature review is literature review. Identify seminar contributions, discuss the gaps, and then tell us how your study intends to fill, the identified gap in the literature. Again, this is just a quick recap. How to proceed with literature review. Find seminar papers and recent articles on the subject. So I'm talking about, when you say find seminar papers, I'm talking about, papers published in Science Direct, Taylor and Francis, Springer, Wiley, Emerald, Sage, JSTOR. Please, okay? Not just going to Google search engine to look for papers. Don't try that, please. As young academics, that is no longer acceptable. That is not acceptable. Please, you don't go to Google search engine and be looking for papers. There is no limit to the amount of nonsense you find on the search engine. There's no, so go to standard archives where you know that, the noise has been filtered out, so to speak. So final seminar papers and set that on the subject, make an outline that shows the progression of research that has led to your research hypothesis or questions. So let's see the discussion of the progression. Avoid paper by paper style of review. It is no longer fashionable. Avoid paper by paper style of review. It is no longer fashionable, please. You don't say Abdulatif examines, Salisu dwells on, Ayinde deals with. It is no longer fashionable. When I say thematic, analyzing the review or organizing the review thematically, talking about looking for arguments that validate your position. For example, an argument that seems to refute your position. So if your position is that phosphate is likely to raise inflation, say a number of studies for different jurisdictions have examined the role of phosphate in inflationary or inflation, in the inflationary trends, inflationary dynamics, right? So see, for example, Salisu 2022. That's how to, not that you say Salisu examines for Kenya, just put all these countries that have arrived at the same conclusion together, right? The overarching conclusion of the literature is that foreign subsidy is inflationary. See, for example, Ayinde 2021. That's how to conduct a standard literature review. I'm not saying Ayinde examines this for Nigeria and finds that Tule does the same for Kenya and finds that that is no longer fashionable. Okay. So for each main point, start by citing non-controversial assumptions or findings. Discuss areas in which conflicting results, if any, have emerged, and then explain the probable sources of disagreement in the literature. It could be by measurement, it could be by modeling, it could be by data. And you emphasize more on that area of your research gap or areas of your research gap. In other words, you emphasize more on the disagreements that speak to your research gap. For example, if you are trying to advance the frontiers in the area of data, then you speak more on data, that there are data issues with the existing literature. And you have your paper intends to fill that gap by constructing an index. And because the construction of index is really demanding in terms of the required funds, that is where you want the agency to support your research. Can you see? That's how to, conduct a literature review. At the end of the review, identify questions that have not been addressed that led to your research hypothesis, or that that will serve as the basis for the new study or for the new proposal that you are now trying to, seek some further support, for. So if there are more than one or two, so at least them, and so we have a number of hypotheses to be tested in the project. Hypothesis 1, hypothesis 2, hypothesis 3, depending on the nature of the project. Avoid plagiarism by giving credit to whom, please. It is important. We all know this. This is one thing about literature review. In literature review, you are tempted to plagiarize. That's why you have to keep it short, keep it simple. All right. Please, there's no way you will not be tempted to plagiarize. So you really have to just straight to the point. But if you are trying to do a lengthy literature review, then there's no way you will not plagiarize. And so by the time you run plagiarism check on your proposal, not even the full paper, on your proposal, you will see that the similarity is going to be very high because of the literature review section. By the time you remove the review section, you see it will reduce significantly. You'll find something that's quite reasonable for the similarity index. So that is why you have to keep it short, keep it simple. Where it is not required, remove it, or don't even do it. If the agency is not, saying, if the agency is saying that, you can just, that a section, that the introduction is enough for both the motivation and the contribution, then you don't need a separate section for the literature review. For AARC, I know for AARC and PEP, it is a requirement to have a review section. for ARC and PEP, it's a requirement to have a section for the review section. But please avoid splitting the review section into 3 subsections, please. Avoid that. Stylized facts. For the stylized facts, this is an extension of the literature review section, okay, where you can then use data to validate some of the discussions in the literature review section. People also call this background to the study. So this is where you use exploratory data analysis tools. Please note that this is just a proposal, but you're also expected to do some stylized facts. It's a way of demonstrating your capacity to execute the project. If others are not doing it, don't worry. You include this section. It also, in a way, speaks to the availability of data. So the funding agency is assured of the availability of data when you include this section. Right. Because most of the donor agencies, particularly for research projects from young academics and graduate students, most of them don't like to fund, the data gathering process or data collection process. So don't even mention there that you'll be using questionnaires for data. No agency, particularly for graduate students, particularly for grants, for graduate students or young academics, no agency, as far as I know, will be happy to fund the data gathering process. No. So you have to demonstrate that you have sufficient data to execute the project. And this, how do you demonstrate it? By creating a section for stylized facts. AERC will not give you money, will not provide funds to do questionnaire, to conduct interviews, social interviews, and and to administer questionnaire. AERC will not. In fact, it's clear that the fund is just for for the main project and not for funding your data. So you have to assure them that you have data. So you just go straight to, and so once you assure the agency of data availability, completing the project within the agreed duration will be very easy. But when you now have to conduct survey, you administer questionnaire, you never can be too sure of the outcome. So most of them, they always discourage, applicants from indicating or from, requesting additional funding support to conduct, surveys. So please bear this in mind when you're writing a proposal. Refrain from, requesting funding support to conduct surveys or to administer questionnaires. Please. No agency will fund that. In fact, that's a recipe for rejection. That was said, the proposal will be rejected to not even be sent out for review. So not that you cannot use primary data, but it has to be processed primary data, processed, not the one that, not the primary data that you will now be the one to administer and then process, and the process is rigorous. So you can say you're using survey data already published, processed by the World Bank, by the National Bureau of Statistics, by the Central Bank of Nigeria, depending on, so that's how to, to justify if you are using survey data. You are allowed to use survey data, but not the one that will be administered by you, please. Okay. So, stylized fact, this is meant to simplify the complexity of empirical findings. So, this section is an extension of the review section. Okay. So, you have to do it to demonstrate that you have the capacity to execute the project if eventually approved for funding. Examples of stylized fact. Raising monetary policy rate may lower the level of inflation. I told you about having a topic that also includes the expected outcome. This is one of them. This is one of them. You can phrase a title that also includes the expected outcome. This is one of them. Here you are saying raising monetary policy rate may lower the level of inflation. So you can then write a proposal that will help us establish this, because you know that from your stylized fact that is true. So to come up with this kind of title, you must have done some experiments. That is one of the requirements for writing, for phrasing a title that includes the expected outcome. You must have done some experiments to suggest this. But again, you also have to be modest. You don't say rating policy will lower, you say may lower, because it is subject to the available data sets and to your capacity, to implement some of the methodological tools. All right. The outcome may be reversed if if submitted to another set of robustness tests. Right. So you have to be clear about. So that's why you have to be modest in the way you qualify it appropriately. This monetary policy rate may lower the level of inflation based on the state of the literature, theory, and empirical findings. Right. Like I said, this is coming from what you have seen in the literature and what you have also observed from the empirical findings. So you can phrase it this way. Specific data sets. So if you want to do standardized fact for this to speak to this expected outcome, then you get data on relevant variables. So you get data on monetary policy rate, you get data on inflation. There are some intervening variables, but at least you need data for the two variables. What are you going to be doing with the two variables? You use exploratory data analysis tools, such as mean, standard deviation, quantiles, plot, scenario analysis, and inferential statistics. When I say inferential statistics, I'm talking about the use of correlation with significance. Right, that's one of them. You can also, so some of the analysis for this example should include the mean values of inflation before and after a sudden increase in the MPR. Right. So you look at inflation before and after the increase in the MPR. And monetary policy rate is not something you don't, once fixed, it tends to persist until another meeting by the monetary policy committee. Right. So it doesn't behave like a typical market rate. Right. Where that can be changing every day or every month. Monetary policy. So it is very easy to trace, how fundamentals respond to, any hike, okay, or an increase in the NPR. So your standard fact should include this. Your standard fact should also include using plot charts, right, to show before and after. Your standard fact should also include or can include some correlation analysis, right, to show the degree of association between the two variables. Is the association positive or negative? Is it significant or not? Right. And then you now make reference to relevant empirical studies to further validate the outcome. So this is what we mean by standardized fact. Can you see? Standardized fact should speak to the literature. So it's an extension of the literature, but the only difference between the standard literature and standardized fact is the use of data for the latter. You use data for stylized fact. So just the way you discuss your empirical results, you do the same for stylized fact. In fact, you can write a full paper with stylized fact. Let me say this. So it will just be introduction, literature review, stylized facts, policy implications, conclusion. Yes. But you cannot write an empirical paper, a full empirical, without stylized fact. You can write a full paper with stylized fact and without empirical analysis. Right. So that means empirical analysis empirical analysis is an extension of stylized fact. But you are just modeling. Modeling what? Modeling your observations, right, from stylized fact. Modeling the outcomes of the stylized fact. That's the way it should be. So you can't jump from introduction, the literature review, to methodology without stylized fact. I say this in most of our papers. But when you're writing a research paper, you're writing a research proposal to be funded. Honestly, this should be your selling point. Reviewers of submissions of proposals, submitted proposals, they look for this more. They love to say things like this, right? So you have to find a way to create a section for this. If the outline of the proposal, from the funding organization, does not include background to the study, find a way to include it in your introduction. in introduction, please. It's important. Another example, fiscal policy shock due to a surprise increase in VAT reduces consumption. What does that mean? How do you validate this? You will need data on VAT, you will need data on household consumption, data on VAT. So then you do some analysis for this by using, you can do the mean value, you can use the mean values, you can use the median values, you can use the mode, depending on the nature of the series. And then you can also chart them, by plotting the values after raising, before raising it. So you can say a year before raising, a year after raising. You look at the outcome. And you also discuss this. So, and you can also do some scenario analysis. Like I said, the issue of correlation inflation statistics. You can do percentiles, quantiles. There's, some insightful, descriptive analysis to support your result. That is what we mean by stylized fact. Stylized fact is different from trend analysis. Trend analysis, you discuss the variables individually. But when you are bringing two variables together, one dependent, one independent, and you are analyzing their behavior over time using exploratory data analysis tools, that is stylized fact. We do more of trend analysis, yes, not stylized fact. And I'm saying that is not good enough. If you want to write a good proposal, this should be your selling point. This should now speak to the subject matter. For example, if the focus is for subsidy and inflation, you use data here to highlight some potential outcomes, expected outcomes of the project. That will encourage the funding organization to really see the potential of the research proposal. Methodology. Like I said previously, there are 3 ways of handling things, but regardless of your choice, you should have 3 sections, regardless of your choice, whether qualitative, whether quantitative, whether mixed. So that methodology, you create a distinct section for theoretical framework. In the language of the qualitative research, it is called research design. Right. So theoretical framework is where you discuss the conceptual issues, the underlying theories, the basis for the analysis, the framework that guides us, that guides the research team when analyzing the subject matter, when analyzing the connection between the dependent and independent, variables, So you have to be clear about that. That is different from the empirical strategy. The empirical strategy has to do with looking at the econometric model, right? So here you look at the underlying theory or the framework that explains generically the connection between the dependent and independent, right? If the research proposal is, is empirical in nature, it's empirical in nature. And then the empirical approach to be used, right? The way we write research proposal for grants may be slightly different from the way we write a research proposal for thesis, please. For research grants, the language should be, relatively, friendly. The language should appeal to a wider audience rather than limiting the focus to the 4 walls of your department and say, well, they would like, would like to see, rigorous things in there, for funding a research project. To fund a research project, you must ensure that you appeal to as many people as possible, people of diverse backgrounds. So when you are writing, don't make it too technical, right? Make it too technical, because the idea is to develop a report that will influence policy, so to speak. Because empirical research, for example, and I'll say something about what the think tanks want, what they would like to see. They want results, not theoretical results, not statistical artifacts. They want results that speak to reality. So even so, when you are writing, so you bear that in mind, that it's not about just writing equations for no reason. You write equations that speak to the research hypothesis, research hypothesis speaking to your research questions speaking to your objectives. and objective speaking to your motivation and contribution. That is the flow. That is the flow. So don't be too technical because your university would like to see technical stuff. No. Right. No, you are writing for both academic and non-academic. So you're writing for, you also have the industry in mind because that's their target. So you should ask yourself, where do these donor agencies get their money from? They largely get the money from, the big players in the industry, from the government, from multilateral institutions. So they are much more concerned about it. So the focus is to now develop, have a platform where ideas can be hatched, where innovative ideas can be promoted and nurtured to fruition. Honestly, that's the ultimate objective. That's the focus of most of the think tanks. So you don't just write, you write all kinds of econometric models, and then you also struggle to explain, and then you struggle with results, let alone the policy implications. So please write in a way that it becomes readable to all, regardless of the sophistication of the proposal. Regardless of the sophistication of the proposal. In fact, some think tanks will tell you, please put all the econometrics in the appendix, right? And then we would like to see a policy brief, right? That is relatively non-technical, or an executive summary, right? That simplifies the analysis and the outcomes. Okay, so please bear this in mind. It is learning by doing. It is learning by doing how to communicate effectively. Communicate in a way that the rigor involved in the project is appreciated, is understood, and is celebrated. Okay, rather than people getting confused. So if as a review of the proposal, I'm not even clear about the message of the proposal, it's not going to fly. It's not going to fly. So you read and reread, you give the proposal to your colleagues to even assist you, review, comment, and that will strengthen the quality of the proposal a lot. Usually, you've got to get involved in so many things before you can develop a good proposal. So you can't do it alone. Even for individual research grants and not institutional research grants, you still have to work with your colleagues to help you, strengthen the quality of the proposal, to help you shaping the proposal. Okay. So for empirical approach, you have the econometric model based on the underlying theory, empirical evidence, and so the econometric model must be well motivated, theoretically, empirically, and also using your institutional knowledge. So, for example, I'm a Nigerian, I'm a researcher resident in Nigeria. I'm not just a Nigerian who is conducting research. I'm also resident in Nigeria. So if I'm talking about fuel subsidy and inflation, I can easily connect with some things than somebody who is a Nigerian but not resident in the country. That's what I mean by institutional knowledge. You understand the workings of the environment because you relate with virtually all the segments of the society, household, business, government. So you understand better, you speak better than a scholar who's a Nigerian but resident in the UK, for example. That's what I mean by institutional knowledge. Discussion of estimation methods is important. It's not enough to say I'm using this methodology. You have to justify why the methodology is important. At every stage of the proposal, please always have in mind that there's a big question mark. Why? I'm using GVAR. Why? Always have that in mind. So at every stage where when you query your statement, you are able to respond better because you know that something is still missing. Right? You're right. I'll be using panel data. Then the question is why panel data? Then put the response there immediately after writing panel data. Panel data is being used as it accommodates blah 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 blah. Rather than just writing I'm using panel data. You are using panel data, and so what? Why not time series? So you have to explain. So the motivation facilitates the comprehension of the proposal. When you at every stage, when you carefully motivate your statements, you carefully motivate your discussions, honestly, it will facilitate comprehension. It's important. Everything revolves around that. So even if you're writing a concept note, if it is not, informative enough, concept note should not be more than 3 pages. But you think it's very easy. If the communication is not right, it's still not going to fly. Right. So it's important. You are not writing just for the academic community, because the money is not coming from your university, it's not coming from your research organization. So check the philosophy of the donor organization first. For example, ARC. ARC is more about policy advocacy and not just generating import, for example, VAR impulse responses for no reason. They will tell you what is the policy message here. What can what can policymakers learn from these results? What can investors, as an investor who would like to invest in Nigeria, you have written a paper on foreign direct investment and exchange volatility using VAR. Okay, that is fine. So as an investor, what can I learn from your results? That is the way some of these think tanks, process research outcomes, not the way academics write research results. No, not the way we discuss results. They want something. That's why after completing the project, if funded, you'll be required to write a policy brief. That policy brief is relatively non-technical, right? And they're targeting, people who are not really as sophisticated as some of us, as some of our scholars, the way we write, the way we approach issues. They are professional. They like to get things simplified without having to belittle the process involved, the rigor involved in the process. It's not that they want to belittle, but they want to understand the concept better beyond just generating results. Okay. So now data issues. You have data scope, right? Data frequency, sources, and limitations. Okay. Work plan. This is where you now have to highlight the schedule of activities for the project. Depending on the nature of the project. The funding agency, if it is demand-oriented, it is usually clearly highlighted in the call that this project will only run for 3 months for demand-oriented research, grants. So the period, the duration is usually indicated. But where it is supply-driven, like I said, if you have, for example, if you are planning to write a proposal for an organization, this is the best time to do it. Most organizations will start executing their project, their budget from February or March, most organizations. So if you have any project in mind for an organization, start writing the concept note now. Don't wait until it gets to August. Most agencies will probably be at that point in time, they're already, winding down, our balance, trying to, evaluate the performance of the budget rather than taking up new projects, right? See how they can complete, the pending projects. So you target the first week of a new fiscal year. It's always good. So that means within that space, if the item is budgeted for or a related item is budgeted for, you are likely going to get, funding support for the proposal, and then you can execute the project within that fiscal year. Otherwise, you'll be advised to apply the following year. That's the thing. So this program is timely for promising young academics who would like to pursue research grants. This is the best time to start writing. Like I said in our organization, we are writing one already to be submitted in about 2 weeks. We wrote 2 for another organization in Africa, submitted. So that's what we do. First quarter of the year, write as many proposals as possible. And don't be too ambitious that you will get, outcome may be negative in some, but you have to keep pushing it until you get it right. Right? There's no guarantee that when you write one, you get it. So you can write like 10, identify potential funding organizations, right? Even in the banking industry, there are banks that, I know I won't mention names, but I know some banks are involved in economic outlook, analysis of economic, outlook for Nigeria. They need experts to do that for them. So if you have the capacity, you can write to, say, for example, Zenith Bank, I'll be happy to do this or collaborate with your economic intelligence unit on, how to draft economic outlook, or how to publish, well motivated economic reports. Wema Bank, Zenith Bank, First Bank, all of them, they are now involved in economic outlook. They produce, they publish economic outlook quarterly, for some monthly, right? So there are ways one can apply grants. You don't have to wait until you get a call and then you apply. It is highly competitive. I keep saying it. Their space is fast shrinking. So look for opportunities elsewhere. Learn to collaborate. Learn to identify, problems in the society. Learn to be innovative in the way you approach problems. So you can't do it alone. That's what I'm saying. That should now be, your selling point. You have to strengthen your capacity to make that your selling point. You are driving, you are walking on the road, you are interacting with people, you are looking for problems to solve in your society. That should be the focus of a scholar, of a researcher. And so when you say I can help you resolve this problem, who will not be happy to have the problem resolved? So if that item, if the proposal if the issue being proposed already has a related item being budgeted for, then you can get funded. Otherwise, you can get you can have the support of the organization, the organization in question in this case. So you can have a table of this nature that looks at that at a glance we can see the duration, right, for the completion of the program, of the project. So without having to even read the content of the work plan, we already know that the first period, this is what you're going to achieve for the next 2 months. This is for a 3-year, project. This is for a 3-year. So if you are doing yours for just 6 months, that means this table will show 6 months. If you are doing for 6 weeks, then it will show 6 weeks. If you are doing for 7 days, you can, so it's good to prepare something like this, right? To show that at every stage, the donor agency or the donor organization, in this case, knows what to request, have regarding the project, because this is clear. So we are saying, so if you are, for the first month, you are very highlighted that you'll be meeting with the advisors. And so they can be asking for chapter 1 for the first month, because it's clear from this work plan that the first month will only be for interaction with the advisors. So this is good. Dissemination of research findings. There are different ways of doing this, right? Stakeholders meetings, seminars, workshops, conferences. Like for AARC, usually organizes at least 2 workshops in a year. There are several other meetings, but for the purpose of research, for the purpose of a funded project, right? AARC, you'll be invited twice a year, twice. Okay, one I think in May, June, the other one, November, December, right? November, December. Okay. So that is one way of disseminating research findings. You discuss your results, you discuss your work in progress, you discuss the final report. And then some organizations will ask you to also publish in their working paper series, or they can even specifically tell you to attend the conference where the paper will be presented, and then it will feature as part of the conference proceedings. Some will tell you to open, to have to publish the report on, to publish it in a reputable journal. Yes, in a reputable journal. Where there is no specific journal being targeted, then it's your responsibility to identify the most suitable. You can also put this on social media, maybe X, Facebook, Instagram, and if it is, if the donor organization, the donor just in question here, encourages that. Otherwise, you limit to publishing it in a reputable journal, presenting at relevant workshops, organizing maybe stakeholders meetings, if that will be funded by the organization providing the fund, right? Because organizing the stakeholder meetings will take it's not free, right? If they're inviting people, you also have to provide per diem, take care of their You provide light breakfast, provide lunch. So you can't take that from your grants. Okay, right. So for all this, I think the only two are relatively free. Social media, exploring the social media and online platforms, and then publishing in a reputable journal. Those ones are relatively, but for organizing stakeholders meetings, that should be funded. Attending workshops, conferences, that should also be funded. So where there is no fund to attend a workshop where you can't use your money, except where it's already embedded in the budget, that you have $2,000 to attend 2 conferences in a year for the purpose of this research project. That's a different thing. That means it's being funded. Conclusion, colleagues. For a research project, I'm talking about research, not conclusion for this presentation. Conclusion for a research proposal. You reiterate the objectives, reiterate the motivation, again, mention the potential contributions and potential policy implications of the study. It's important. So this is like summarizing everything you have in the main proposal. So for some reviewers, they start with, they go to abstract and conclusion before they then read the full proposal. The idea is this. We say, to see whether it is worth reading the full proposal. They go straight to the abstract to check. They also check the conclusion. So if the 2 sections are not informative enough, the reviewer will just, I would say, reject. So we do that later, even for the side publications. As a reviewer, I'll first check your abstract and be sure that what the message there is something that will encourage me to read the entire paper. So don't belittle any section. Don't say this one is not important. The most important thing is methodology. Methodology is good because it explains how the project will be executed, eventually accepted for funding, for proof of funding. But at the same time, remember, people these days, everybody is in a hurry. We are not patient enough to read any document. So bearing that in mind, you know that the sections that are most concise will be the first target. That's abstract and then conclusion. Okay, you don't save. You say save the best for. You don't do that. Okay? You save. You ensure you start with your best. All right. Don't reserve the best for last. Okay. Citation and referencing. We are all familiar with this. We use APA formats. Okay. So I encourage all of you to read the latest edition of the APA. I think it's 8. Read it, please. For in-text citations, for referencing. Okay. Read the latest version of APA, even for listing of authors. Okay, please go online, you will see it there for in-text citations and for referencing. Final remarks for my presentation, ladies and gentlemen. I encourage graduate students and young academics to form research groups or research clusters based on areas of research interest. You cannot do this alone. Okay, you must learn to work with your colleagues. So it's even a requirement. Some will tell you, can you work in a team? Can you be a good team player? It's important. It's not just about Messi, Ronaldo coordinating a team. This is also applicable to our field. All right. You must learn to work with your colleagues. Be a good team player. You must be humble enough to learn from your colleagues. That is the spirit, of research collaboration. Right. That is the intuition behind research collaboration. Knowledge sharing. Knowledge sharing. Even for Fountain University, each department or the postgraduate school should have research groups based on the research interest of the graduate students and the academics in Fountain University. That will facilitate research publication, research collaboration among, the students and lecturers in the university. It will be nice to involve senior researchers with proven records of capacity to attract research grants in the formation of research groups. It's important. You can't give what you don't have. And it will be very easy for you to give what you have because you do it effortlessly. So if you have somebody who attract grants virtually every academic year, you know, that person should be one of your go-to guys for collaboration because the person already understands the requirement for attracting grants. And I mean, it's not going to be, doing, YouTube lectures on how to attract grants. So you have to be humble enough, to work with that person. We have so many of them around. They attract grants every year. So why not just say, this guy, how are you doing it? Tell me, explain to me, can we work together? I'm looking at this problem and I feel I have the capacity to solve the problem. But who do I write to? You can be advised. You can say, write to Minister of Finance. I have contact there. They'll be willing to fund this kind of project. That's the kind of conversation you should be having with senior researchers. But again, you also must learn to bring something concrete on the table or to the table. All right. So please identify competent senior academics, researchers, established researchers to mentor you. It's important. You can't do this alone. Right. All right. So like I said, this arrangement can help facilitate research collaboration and of course research publications when you collaborate with research. So when you say in a research group, you must ensure you also have like a team lead, a group lead, and that should be an established researcher with proven records of capacity to attract research grants. Okay, and then, like I said, this idea of arranging, grouping us, having research groups, or academics, in research groups or research clusters, will also help facilitate, response to calls for expression of interest, right? So, and because well, you will not be the one to write the entire proposal. About 4 of you will be involved. It will be easier for you to approach any call. It's easier for you to write any proposal as long as it is well targeted. When I say well targeted, is that you are writing on poverty, you can include somebody from engineering, for example, because what will be the role of that person there? So you must ensure the identification of people to work in a team is targeted, well targeted. Okay. So SEER is a viable platform to facilitate this kind of collaboration. So I encourage you to reach out to SEER for this kind of initiative. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Over to you, PR.
All right, sir. Thank you very much. That was a very detailed session. Please, for those of us on the call, let us use the raise hand feature to appreciate. Sorry, there's a clapping feature that we can use to appreciate our resource person. The session ran for almost 3 hours. Thank you very much for that amazing presentation, very detailed one. If there's anything I can use to conclude or to just drive home what he said while he was concluding, he said something about standing on the shoulders of giants. If we're able to identify giants around us in this journey, let us identify them and stand on their shoulders. It's going to go a long way. For everyone, once again, on behalf of the Deans for Postgraduate Studies, I want to thank you, sir, for that amazing presentation. So if we have questions, please, we can drop it in the chat box. Like we said, we have our emails, so the recording will be processed and it will be sent to us via email. We'll also include the slide presentation. I'm very sure Prof will share it with us, so it will be included in the email as well. So you can expect to have that before the close of business today, by God's grace. So do we have any question, please?
Robustness checks will come after the acceptance of the proposal for funding, right? I only consider that under, the results section. Okay. And that should be, in my opinion, the most important subsection under the results section. Because how do you validate your main results without robustness? Particularly if the paper is for policy, right? Not just for publication, okay? That the idea is to come up with actionable policy recommendations. Then we have to be sure that we are not being misled by your analysis. That is the essence of robustness checks. Okay, so you have a subsection under the resource section for the main findings, and then another subsection for robustness checks. What are you expected to do under that section? Like I said, you don't do robustness when you're writing a proposal for grants. You do robustness when the proposal is already approved for implementation. Okay, so under robustness, you can do robustness based on the choice of data, the choice of methods, the choice of empirical models, choice of theories, choice of scope. Let me do data first. So let's say you are looking at inflation and monetary policy shock. Inflation and monetary policy shock. For the two variables, you can get monthly frequency. Monthly frequency, you can get monthly frequency for the two. So you can check whether the results, right, is robust to alternative data frequencies. You can check whether the outcome is robust or is not sensitive to the choice of data frequency. So you do monthly, you also do quarterly. Check the results. You are not going to get the same magnitude for the outcome, but for the coefficient, right? You won't get the same magnitude for the coefficient. But the sign should not change by virtue of the use of a different frequency. That's what we mean by robustness. So if the result or the outcome from the main analysis is positive, using monthly frequency, it should also be positive for quarterly. It should not be negative. Where it is negative, that means the outcome is not robust. It's sensitive to the choice of data frequency. Another example is the choice of empirical models. Right. So you are looking at inflation as a function of monetary policy shock. If truly the model is reliable and stable, if you include another predictor that is not correlated with monetary policy shock, it should not alter the behavior of monetary policy shock in the model. An example, introducing, for example, fiscal policy shock into the model. And after establishing that fiscal policy shock is not correlated with monetary policy shock, it should not reverse the sign of monetary policy shock. Now, if including fiscal policy shock changes the sign from being positive, hypothetically, to negative, then that means the model is not robust. That is how to deal with robustness checks. But you don't do that when you're writing a side proposal for grants. Please note this. But one of the takeaways here should be that you cannot write a full paper publishable in a good journal without including robustness checks. Okay? Because that's how to establish or validate your results. That's how to establish the robustness of your result, the validity of your result, the reliability of your results. Thank you. Next question, please.
So we have a couple questions. So I don't know. I want to request that if possible, sir, we keep it very brief because if it's very deep, in the next one, I might not leave here. So the next one says, someone access a high-profile journal when his or institution doesn't have access?
Well, I don't know how to respond to that. You have to look for access.
Okay.
Yes, you have to look. But you can discuss with your colleagues. People won't say anything about access, really. Reach out to them. People have their own way of finding access. So you don't have to rely so much. But it is important we encourage our universities, our institutions to subscribe to some of these standard journal archives. You can't write any good paper without. Please refrain from just going online to download papers. It's not good. It's not really professional as an academic to be doing that. There's no limit to the amount of nonsense you find online. So please refrain from it. Reach out to your colleagues. They will explain to you how to find access, please. But let's begin to encourage our institutions to subscribe. It's important. It should be part of the benefits of being, academics, lecturers, researchers in our universities. Let's begin to push for, that reform. It is not impossible, honestly. But please reach out to your colleagues. They will explain to you how to individually access some of these journal archives. Thank you.
All right, sir. So the next one says, is it ideal to seek grant for a completed project, especially when there is need to get funds for publication and honorarium for authors?
Okay. Well, I don't believe, it's a completed job. It's relative. So, but if the completed project is already published, it can be funded. I hope you understand what I mean. So, but it is to you, it is completed. But so in the eyes of the public, it is not there, it doesn't exist. Right. But if you are saying that the paper is already online, published, it will be unethical for you to be writing a proposal on that because it's available online already. So what would they learn from something that's already published? It's out there already. People have started consuming it. So we're talking about something that is innovative. Innovative in the sense that it is not known to the world. But where as far as I'm concerned, it is done, but it's not visible to the public, then it's not done. In fact, in the process of writing the proposal, they can even change the focus of the project. So don't feel that it is completed. So nothing is completed until it becomes visible and published in a good journal. So if that is the case, you can apply for research grants to fund the completed job of yours that's not visible to anybody except you alone. All right, next question, please.
All right, so this person wants to know, for those who doesn't have PhD yet, is it better to apply for funding paired with PhD or without PhD?
There are grants for academic programs. Yes, there are grants for academic programs. I like that question because here we are focusing on research grant, but there are grants to pursue an advanced degree or to pursue advanced degrees for different fields. Please check online. There are different routes these days, different channels of getting academic, grants for academic programs. For example, GRE is a viable one. GRE. If you are able to, you get a very good, cumulatively very high score, your PhD program can be funded by a very good university in the US. I have quite a number of mentees in the US, enjoying that. Fully funded, full scholarship. So GRE is one of them. If you are involved, I have one of my mentees who will be going for a program in South Africa. One is also for postdoctoral fellowship. So there are programs like that, postdoctoral fellowships, doctoral fellowships, but highly competitive. Very competitive. Yes, you can. But one quick way of winning such grants is to start writing. So if as a young researcher, you have papers to your credit, honestly, attracting grants for a doctoral degree program is going to be very easy. If after completing master's, you now, you are involved in research already, right, with publications to your credits, honestly, getting research in any university, you only need to write a potential advisor that, in fact, I'm working on working to strengthen the profile of a friend now. We developed two indices together. right? Very close to my brother. Said, no, don't apply for any grant yet. Complete 3 projects that speak to your, your areas of research interest, and then send the papers to any of, any of the established researchers in the US. The person will be the one to look for grants, certainly. So that's the way it works. People are looking for assets and not liabilities these days, unfortunately. Nobody's ready to mentor from scratch. You must know these, colleagues. Particularly for our graduate students, people are looking for, again, underlined, assets, not liabilities. So when we have demonstrated that you're a potential asset, is to show quality research output. Get involved in research. That's the easiest way to go. It will fast track everything. I'm a living witness, a living testimony for that. Next question, please.
All right, sir. Thank you, sir. I'm going to combine 2 questions now. One, somebody wants your view on when it comes to high impact journal. The person wants your view about high article publishing charges. That is one. Number 2, another person wants to know how we can how to join or participate in research focus group if there are available ones.
Excellent. Submission. See, I mentioned something about input outputs. Even degree programs, nothing is free these days. BSc, somebody will still have to pay for it, whether by your parent guardian or whoever. So nothing is free. It's like you're building a profile for yourself. You are the one, you are targeting something, so you got to invest in that thing, right? So that's your input. When the output begins to mature, let me share one experience with you. I just completed a project for PEP. Right, they needed an expert that can handle GVAR. I have the highest number of publications globally on GVAR. So the organization reached out to me to, facilitate a project for them. Just completed the project with one of my collaborators in Nigeria, funded by the organization. Somebody who is, the person paying you is the one reaching out to you to assist. That is what research does to scholars. So you've got to invest in that. You have to keep pushing it. It's not going to be easy. When I was writing GVAR, I didn't have the organization in mind. When I was writing papers on GVAR, I did not have the organization that, contacted me in mind. I was just working to build my profile. And just last year, they wrote to me, there's a call already, but we feel you are the most suitable for this job. Please join our network and then apply formally. And I got the job. So that's the way it works, colleagues. That's what I said. There's a new wave. It's an emerging trend in grants, in research sponsorship, research funding. Grant awarding institutions now reach out to establish research because most of them, they are busy. They don't have the time to be checking online for calls. And the grant awarding institutions, they don't want random people to be applying for things that they can't even verify whether they have the capacity to do it or not. So these days you see calls, but they still reach out to the established researchers to indicate interest. Although they will tell them, there's no guarantee that we'll give you, but please, we'll be happy to have your submission or your application. That's the way it was, colleagues. So invest in your career. It's not going to be, nothing good. See, good things don't come cheap. They don't come easy. You've got to pay for it. So don't feel bad at all. At a later time, somebody will pay, that's what we call returns on investment, right? Returns on education, right? Go and read the paper by Mankiw and what's this other guy, Barrow. Yes, about returns on. You've got to invest first. That should be your own, the price of cost of education. But the returns greater than the cost. I can assure you that. Far outweigh the cost. So invest in your career, invest in your profile. It's not going to be cheap. Nobody will stand there, don't expect that you start today and then people will start paying for your research the next day. It doesn't happen, it doesn't work that way. You have to demonstrate to a large extent that you can do it. And how can that be achieved? By showing a strong research profile. So it's not going to be easy, ladies and gentlemen. Next question, please. Yes, and then the second part is about what? After submission fees and something, you two questions combined.
Yes, focus groups are if they are available.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, reach out. I think one of my, I believe, okay, yes, Abib Olaniro is online. Please share your WhatsApp number and email address. Abib is working directly with me. I will reach out to whoever that's interested in collaborating with our center. Because it will be, in fact, let me also share this with you. The proposal we are writing for our organization requires that we also collaborate with female scholars. So I personally contacted them. So we do this. So if you are, but you have to formally join, you have to formally apply for our fellowship appointment to be able to benefit from that kind of engagement or collaboration. So if there's any project we are proposing and we feel you benefit from it, or you have the capacity, or you have the potential, we'll gladly extend the collaboration to you. So, but you have to formally join our center through our fellowship appointment. So I've asked, I can see Abib Olaniro online. So he will share his email, his contact with us. If you are interested, please let me know.
All right, thank you, sir. So somebody wants clarification about something you said, that are you saying theoretical reviews and empirical reviews cannot be done in literature review?
So if your study is empirical, if it's about adding more variables because the existing literature does not seem to capture some important variables, that's empirical. Focus on why you should add more variables rather than doing theoretical literature, empirical literature, methodological literature. Its contribution is empirical. You are saying the measurement, for example, you are working after study, you are working on oil uncertainty and economic growth. Oil uncertainty, you can say, well, in the literature, oil uncertainty is only measured using, using the model-based approach. That you are using the text-based approach, the latent approach, right? So speak to that. That is your contribution. So your contribution should be, literature review should highlight your area of interest, the focus of the contribution, not this standard, not this archaic way of doing literature review, theoretical, empirical. It's old, please refrain from it. It's no longer, it's old-fashioned. Let me put it that way. So please refrain from, just focus on the research contribution. What is your contribution? To use a new method. If your contribution is methodological, right, is methodological, then the literature review should also be methodological. So you are saying, I'm using a different method as VAR instead of VAR. Then the literature review should focus on why the outcomes of VAR and why you think SVAR should be considered more suitable for the analysis, and not just doing methodological, empirical. So it should be about the focus of your contribution. If your contribution is theoretical, then the review should reflect that. You don't need empirical and methodological in that instance. That's the message. Now, if you check on the page, if you check the outline for the research proposals on ARC website, it is boldly written on that website. I encourage all of you to check the website of ARC, that research proposals should avoid splitting the literature review into 3 sections. It is no longer fashionable. It is no longer acceptable. Thank you. Next question, please.
All right, so the next question says, what are the nuances of collaborations and paper publications among researchers from different countries? Do research culture, institutional ranking, or career level matter?
Yes, let me tell you this. One of my top collaborators now is Rogan Gupta. Rogan Gupta is, if you check the ranking of scholars in Africa, I'm sure you all know it's number 1. It's been number 1 for about 10 years. Right? It's one of my top collaborators. Another, collaborator, in terms of editorial engagement is Paresh Narayan. If you check the ranking of scholars in Asia Pacific, is number 1. So what is that telling you? You mentioned, you said this very, well summarized, PRO. standing on the shoulders of giants. I like that. Identify established researchers. That will speed up things. I don't have to say, I mean, don't have to talk too much on that. Okay. If you want to learn fast in our area, identify competent. I'm not talking about professors who are not visible, right? I'm talking about people who understand how to promote scholarship.
I believe the network is from our facilitator's end. Please let's hold on.